Today, I want to talk about a war that's barely making international headlines, but it's become one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters. And that's what's happening in Sudan, with millions displaced, famine looming, and a regional power struggle. This war isn't just about politics, it's a fight over land, control, and natural resources. So, how did we get here? This war began in April 2023 when fighting broke out between two forces that were once allies. The Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemeti. Now, in 2019, former President Omar al-Bashir was ousted. A power-sharing transition agreement was struck between civilian and military leaders. It created a sovereign council chaired by al-Burhan and Hemeti as his deputy, and a civilian cabinet led by Abdullah Hamdok as prime minister. Now, together, they were meant to guide Sudan toward democratic elections in roughly 3 years. But that transition collapsed in October 2021 when al-Burhan and Hemeti staged a coup. Over the next 2 years, their alliance fractured, and by April 2023, the two men had turned on each other, each seeking control of Sudan's future. So where do we stand now? Today, the RSF controls much of Western Sudan, including large parts of Darfur. The SAF holds the north and east, including Port Sudan on the Red Sea. Now, Darfur is vast, roughly a fifth of Sudan's land, and it borders Chad, Libya, and the Central African Republic. Control of Darfur means control of cross-border trade and access to Sudan's richest gold mines. And gold isn't just a resource, it's partly funding this war. The RSF controls key gold mines and smuggling routes into Darfur, giving it access to cash networks and helping it buy weapons and pay fighters. So whoever controls Sudan's gold mines controls enormous wartime leverage. Darfur is also significant for other reasons. This is where Omar al-Bashir's regime carried out genocide and mass atrocities 2 decades ago, and they led to his indictment by the International Criminal Court, where he's still wanted on charges including genocide and other war crimes. Now, al-Bashir's campaign was backed by Arab fighters known as the Janjaweed militias, who were accused of attacks including mass killings, rape, and burning down villages in non-Arab communities. The RSF today evolved from these militias. And human rights groups warn that similar ethnically charged killings are happening in Darfur now, increasingly aimed at non-Arab communities. Satellite images show mass graves in parts of Darfur, which rights groups say are linked to civilians executed while fleeing. In the east of the country, the capital Khartoum is a battlefield. So Port Sudan on the Red Sea is now the de facto capital, where al-Burhan and his ministers are trying to run what's left of the state. Port Sudan's location makes it critical for shipping, aid, and fuel supplies, and it's a vital link between Africa, the Gulf, and Europe. The Kordofan region in central Sudan is another battleground. Now, it's strategically important because it's rich in oil fields and acts as a transport corridor that links Khartoum to Darfur. The RSF and SAF control different parts of this region. So what's unfolding in Sudan is a fight for territory, money, and power, but it's also causing a humanitarian catastrophe. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Sudan's war is spiraling out of control. Humanitarian agencies call it the world's largest displacement crisis. The UNHCR estimates over 12 million people have been forced from their homes. More than 10 million internally displaced. That's more than the entire population of Switzerland. But the most staggering part is that more than 21 million Sudanese, almost half the population, face severe hunger, according to the World Food Programme. Famine has already been declared in El Fasher in North Sudan and Kadugli in South Kordofan. Other areas are at imminent risk of famine if aid doesn't reach them soon. And aid agencies say both the RSF and SAF have denied access or imposed impossible restrictions, worsening famine conditions. And the death toll is rising too. UN estimates are in the tens of thousands, although aid groups say the real figure could be in the hundreds of thousands. So, how does the world see this war in Sudan? Western countries condemn both sides for abuses, but continue to deal with the SAF in official communications since Al Burhan was Sudan's head of state before the war began. The SAF also draws support from Sudan's old political elite and the traditional military establishment. Egypt is the SAF's strongest regional ally, sharing a border and national security interests, including stability along the Nile. Red Sea neighbors like Saudi Arabia and Eritrea mainly worry about the risk of Sudan collapsing on their doorstep, even as they criticize atrocities by both sides. Now, although the SAF still has international recognition, on the ground, the RSF controls huge areas of territory. Reports from a UN panel of experts and independent journalists document alleged links between the United Arab Emirates and the RSF, including possible funding and arms supplies. The UAE denies the allegations. Investigators also say the RSF maintains cross-border networks in Chad and Libya, using smuggling and trade routes to move gold and, in some cases, weapons. Now, all of this despite a UN arms embargo on Darfur, which has been in place since 2004 and prohibits supplying weapons to armed groups there. So this isn't just a local fight. Global shipping routes, migration flows, and energy security are all at stake. So why isn't Sudan front page news? Well, much of the world's attention has been focused on Gaza and Ukraine, pushing Sudan off the agenda. And Sudan's war is also extremely complex and difficult to verify. Media blackouts and limited internet access mean information from the ground is hard to get. But aid groups have kept their eye on Sudan, and you can find out more through them. As always, I've added key sources to this video in my YouTube description, but this time I'm also adding links to aid organizations working on Sudan for anyone who wants to find out more or wants to help. Because this is a humanitarian tragedy that's unfolding, where millions are trapped and starving. So if the world isn't watching, it should be. That's it for now. How do you feel about the world's attention or lack of it on Sudan? Send me your thoughts, DM me, or leave me a comment. Thanks for watching.